Hi, I'm Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that focuses on musicians, authors, and interesting people. We like to say we're making a difference one artist at a time. So sit back, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. Today's guest is a funny comedian that I have known for a couple of decades. You've heard him on the Bob and Tom Show. Now, if you've been lucky enough to catch this guy on stage, he will give you a bunch of belly laughs. He's a great guy and the biggest name in comedy. Will you please welcome my friend Costaki Economopoulos.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
I can't believe I blew the name. I've known you for a long time.
It's funny. I was just talking about that with the Bob and Tom guys. Willie goofed up my name in one of the interviews we just did because he said it over and over and over and over again every time we did interviews together. And a couple of times he just completely murdered it. And you know what? His dad, Tom Griswold, still does that once in a while, and I've known him forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I get it. You're in your head. It's a long, ridiculous name.
Well, I remember.
No worries.
I remember when they came up with that jingle for you. You know, and
and
the girls couldn't pronounce your name. I thought that was just one of the funniest bits that they'd done in a long, long time. That's a really good stuff thing, man.
That was good, yeah.
Thanks again for doing that comedy gig last year. The last time Costaki and I talked was actually at a comedy night that my radio station put on last February. It was a cold, cold night. Thanks again for putting a lot of belly laughs into the fine folks that came out on that February night.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a pleasure. It was a little bit of a weird venue, and they refused to add a show once we sold one out, like 2 weeks in front of when the date was.
I know, and it was standing room only when we were there, too. It's a shame, too.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely. It sure beats talking to a bunch of crickets, right?
I've done that.
Growing up with a name like Costaki Economopoulos, man, I bet you you really and truly cursed your parents learning how to write that name in kindergarten and first grade.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if I told you this story, but my first day of first grade, Georgia Public Elementary School, I came home. They taped my name on my desk. I came home. I wrote it out for my mom, and they taught me wrong. It was misspelled on my desk in first grade on the first day.
Wow.
And then cut to 40 years later, I'm in a New York City public school with my daughter. We go in on the first day to get her settled, and her name is taped on her desk, and it is wrong.
The tradition lasts and moves on, yeah. Did you play?
Let's not do this again. Let's fix this right now.
Did you play any sports in high school or college?
No, I played some. I was kind of a soccer kid, so I played soccer up through about 8th grade. And
I was going to say, putting the name like Economopoulos would go like this side, up that side, back down the other side.
You know what? It's one of my great regrets that I never got a jersey with my name on the back. I never did.
You should go ahead and do that because you've been so involved with NFL. You should go ahead and have Economopoulos, then have a hyphen, and have the rest of your name on the other side.
It's funny. The NFL shop has had a long-standing rule. It's a 12-letter max, and I've got 13 letters.
Oh, my.
I think they fudged it a little. I think you can get 13 now, but it's like a special order.
I'll never forget, I used to announce hockey games, high school hockey games, college hockey games and such, and one of the parents came up to me and said, "You mispronounced my kid's name." I said, "Your son has got 16 consonants and two vowels, you know." How do you do that? Yeah. And his name, literally his name went like this, and this. It was just so long.
That's great.
Good Polish
those
name.
Eastern European names are, man, they're hard to look at sometimes. You're like, where does the sound go? I don't know where the vowels are in this crazy name.
Oh, gosh. Your career began in 1993. You were attending grad school at University of Georgia. What was your major? Was it political science?
Yeah, I was poli-sci, and then in grad school I was studying mostly American politics, American elections, things like that. Yeah, it's crazy.
So you could have been one of those Washington reporters then, couldn't you?
Yeah, well, the goal was to teach American government. Both of my parents have PhDs and were professors and lifelong teachers in different capacities through their lives. My dad in particular was kind of a model of mine. He did 30 years of teaching at the college level, Dr. E. And my mom bounced around and did a bunch of cool stuff with she was mostly a middle school math teacher, and then eventually graduated and taught middle school math teachers how to teach math, kind of thing. And so I was going to teach, and I still have my books. I saved them and thought, well, I'll go on the road, and if it doesn't work out, I'll come back and I'll teach American government at some small school somewhere. And you know what, it still might not work out.
Well, that's just it. Here's the thing: that if you've got two parents, especially two educators for parents, when they found out that you were going to take your degree and do stand-up comedy, how did they take that idea?
You know what? My dad has a thick Greek accent. He said, "You want to be standing comedian? Are you crazy?" But he was, and my mom too. And my mom to this day is still like, Dad's gone, but Mom has been my greatest fan always. And both of them, they supported me. They were a little worried about me at the beginning. It's such a weird dream to try to chase, but they always came to I would work the Atlanta Punchline, my home club, once a year or so. And they would always come, pick a night, bring their friends. They were very supportive. In the early days, I kind of used their house as a home base, for a couple years when I was on the road. And there was a stretch when, in the old days, the clubs were, most of the clubs were full weeks. Now they're mostly weekends, right? But in the old days, the clubs would go Tuesday to Sunday or Monday to Saturday or something. And I would book 3, 4, 5 of them in a row and not come home. I would just go. I would go from Toledo to Cincinnati to Oklahoma City and Minneapolis, and then come back for a week after all that stuff. So,
wow.
The old days, the road it was definitely a young man's game then. It is now, but even more so then. You would really be gone for a while.
Right, I totally get that. Now, it's nice to have supportive parents. I'll never forget when I was first got into radio, I'd be sending air checks to my dad to listen to and such, to hear his little boy on the radio and such. And it usually was rock stations. I did rock for 20, 23, 24 years, and country was 16 years or something like that. He says, I love hearing you on the radio, but you don't play enough polkas.
What?
You don't play enough polkas.
No one's ever given that note ever.
Oh, no. No, my dad was Polish, so yeah, it was a big thing was polkas and such. Being
air checks, do they still call it that?
Well, the thing is, it's totally different nowadays because there's no tapes. You used to pop a tape in every time you hit the microphone, it cued the thing. You took it into the program director, and he told you what you were doing right, what you were doing wrong, and nowadays I don't even know how they do it anymore. I mean, I just recently retired, so. It's just you kind of have to do it yourself if you want to actually get a copy of what you sound like.
But is it now? The change for comics is always, because I used to send VHS tapes and headshots and bios in a mailer. But now it's just you just send a YouTube clip. Is that sort of, does radio have a parallel universe for that?
I think we're still going with MP3 files of us on the radio. That's the last That's the last thing I did when I got that job in LaPorte. That's what I did was I had an MP3 when I was on the air.
So that's a modern air check,
it
right?
is.
It's just a different technology.
Pretty much so. And before I actually retired, I was recording my shows from another room type thing and making sure that I had that for posterity's sake.
Wait, did you bury the lead? Did you retire since I saw you?
Yeah,
or you retired when I saw you?
I retired just this last January 1st.
Congratulations!
Yeah, after 44 plus years, I finally hung it up. That's why I'm doing this podcast show. This is my nicotine patch.
Yeah,
so I don't have to go back into radio again.
Right? No, that's a perfect answer. I love it.
Being a comedian, there's always a go-to joke. When your audience starts to turn on you, you need to reel them back in. What's your go-to joke?
I used to do was extra virgin olive oil. What the hell does that mean? It's extra virgin. No one ever hit on it. It never went to the prom. It's extra virgin. You think the cartoon character olive oil was a virgin? That would explain Popeye's forearms. That one was one of those, jokes. In my head, they sort of have percentages,
Right.
That one's like 99 in a club setting. That's one of the safest ones. If I was ever tanking or had some weird interaction, I could drop those couple of lines and sort of, rebuild the machine from there, Or if my closer didn't work, I could do that line to get out,
How do you handle hecklers?
You know what? I used to be panicked about it. I didn't want to talk to the crowd. I'm very much a writer-driven style. It was about the words and the jokes. I didn't even particularly like the performing. It was just I had to do it in order to get the jokes out. I think that the trick I use, it's not particularly cutting edge, but it does work, is to react organically. Like if it's something, if you said it really loud, go, that was loud. Are you okay? Like it helps release the tension in the room to say the truth. That's a little bit of an improv trick that I've learned. If somebody sounds drunk, did you start drinking around noon today? So you can disarm the moment by being honest with it, or like, wow, your voice is terrifying, or, boy, I bet your husband loves it when you're not around. It gets a little peace and quiet. Anything to react in an organic way to what's happening.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as a comic, you've got the microphone, the lights, and the attention, and hopefully the love of the audience. You're allowed to tear them apart too,
Right. And that's what I don't understand is individuals who will come up to you after the show and say, I was offended by that particular joke. Everyone's up for grabs. Everything's up for grabs when you go to a comedy venue. I don't think they get that.
It's very strange to me I guess it's always happened. I feel like we're having a cultural conversation about things, and we're getting very sensitive as a group. It's funny to me because that's part of the joy of a stand-up situation. It's non-corporate. It's not on TV. There's no sponsors. There's no advertisers. It's one of the last bastions of unadulterated free speech.
Right,
and part of the joy of stand-up is that you're in a dark room having drinks, and we're saying things you're not supposed to say in polite society.
Absolutely.
That's not everyone embraces that as part of the deal, but that's one of the joys of stand-up in my mind. So to try to play some gotcha political game where you grab a comic's joke and pull it out of the room and out of context and put it in black and white print with no smiling and no understanding of the greater scene that you were in to try to get them. It's sad, lazy journalism, in my opinion. It's not even a real thing, but it is clickable. So I understand why it works, but you should be ashamed if that's what you're doing for journalism,
Yeah. It's strange when you wind up having an individual in the audience. So, my son is disabled and you made fun of him, blah, 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 blah. All you can do is just say, hey, if I were to clean up my act and so I didn't offend anyone, I wouldn't be up on stage. And,
it really is true. At some point, you have to be aware and not be tone deaf to the situation. You don't want to be a jackass. But also, yes, if you carve down all the edges, you're just left with vanilla ice cream. And that's not what everybody wants,
That's for sure. To your credit, you've done Showtime specials, Last Comic Standing, Nick Mom Night Out. Also performed at all 50 states.
I forgot that one.
You covered the country's best clubs, most beautiful theaters, dozens of colleges. You made it to The Tonight Show, Late Late Show, the Best Damn Sports Show. All these comedy gigs, what would you call your high water mark?
Well, it depends how you define it. Here's a weird story. One of the reasons I got into stand-up is I wanted it to take me places that I would never otherwise see. There's something romantic about the cowboyness of it. I got all these places I have to go, and then I get to experience the going and the being there. And one day I was eating a tuna fish sandwich on my bed in the hotel at the Atlantis Resort in the Bahamas.
Oh, nice venue there. Yeah,
it's got the world's largest outdoor aquarium in the backyard. It's a ridiculously beautiful place. And I was flipping around the TV. The prize on Jeopardy was a week at Atlantis. And I was there for 2 weeks, and I got to tell jokes, and they were paying me. I was like, I win,
Absolutely.
So that's just one of many examples of a moment in time where I'm like, you know what? My life is a great gift. And it's because of stand-up comedy, that I put my head down, I did all the work, and I hung in there when it was hard, and I got lucky here and there, and I just kept working, and I get to have this weirdo, fantastic existence, and believe me, I feel blessed. It's been a pleasure.
And you're good at it too, and that's the thing. I mean, there's just so many people that are in certain businesses, the entertainment business, and they just aren't good. And I know it's just like, boy, you really and truly missed your calling. I always get a kick out of that. I said, if something were to happen to my throat, I actually had on Judy Rodman on. Judy was a country singer back in the 80s, but now she is a vocal coach out of Nashville. And we were talking about the fact that I had surgery, and I was only concerned about the anesthesiologist playing with my vocal cords. I said, that's why I make my living, don't mess with it, because I don't have any other skills. Me being on the radio is my only skill. So that's just it as far as that goes. And you've been doing such a wonderful job entertaining people through the years. You were on the Tonight Show. Was that Leno, Jimmy, or Conan? Who was?
Actually, that Tonight Show credit is a writing credit, not an appearance credit. I used to write jokes, and I would sit in Nebraska or wherever I was and write 15, 20 jokes in the middle of the day and fax. They called us faxers. I was emailing it by the time I was doing it. Yeah. We would email jokes to Jay's writing group. And, every once in a while they would pick one and do it. And it was really exciting for me. Sometimes I would run out of the room. I was talking to 62 people, and I would watch the screen, and Jay Leno would tell a joke to 4 million that I wrote. There's something very rewarding to me about that. Mm-hmm. And it made it seem possible to me, like, oh, okay, I can hang with some of these best writers in the world once in a while. And I'm not even there. I mean, if I was in the room, they'd obviously be picking my stuff more often. So that was kind of an important step for me, at least psychologically. Wonderful. I think it paid $75 a joke if they pick one, which is ridiculous to get on a national show to talk to 4 million people. But we weren't official writers. We were just there were a handful of guys that sent stuff in from the road. We were just like an addendum email team, Right.
I did for 19 years at the All-Star Radio Network. I did morning show prep, just like you did for Wise Brothers for the Complete Sheet.
Oh, the Complete Sheet. Yeah, that's right.
You did Complete Sheet. I was All-Star Radio. I was doing comedic voices. I was doing a lot of crazy commercials and such. And it's just a thrill to hear your stuff, on the thing. It was strange when I first started. They offered me $25 per bit. I said, "Tell you what, keep the $25. Give me the reel. That way I can hear all the other stuff, and so that way I can grow as a comedic writer." And the stuff that we had back in the 80s was just pretty doggone funny. Blew me away, some of the stuff that we came up with that actually made me a better writer today, even that much.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. When I started at the Complete Sheet, they paid us $7 for jokes that they picked and no money for jokes they didn't pick. But they picked them. I picked a lot. So I mean, daily I would write every day. That was another step. That was more of a work ethic kind of lesson for me of like, okay, put your head down. Yes, there's a blank page. Yes, this is scary. Shut up and do it anyway. I made some, by early comedian standards, I made some pretty good money. 7 times 20 or whatever. It ends up being money at the end of the end of the week, at the end of the couple of weeks. So, and it was good. It was a good experience. It was a little frustrating this too. When you're writing for somebody else, you don't get to make the final decision about what's chosen. Right. And sometimes my babies weren't chosen, and it hurts a little. Like, that's the best joke. Why did you even pick this other thing? I barely even typed it in. This is the joke right here. You're picking it wrong, You
know what's strange? Sometimes, I used Wise Brothers for the last 10, 15 years or so, right after I got out of All-Star Radio. And the material I use a lot of their stuff, but I would often rewrite some of their own punchlines. Because I thought it flowed a little bit better, differently, or whatever. Anyways,
that's the purpose of a prep sheet. It's just like somebody assisting you. Hopefully, you're putting your own spin on it.
Did you hear announcers reading it word for word and not getting it? It's just, why did you even bother? I got to ask you this. This is something that you and I talked about last year that I wanted to share with the audience. This is a totally different audience here. There was a section we always do called Tales from the Road. These are the infamous road stories of going to a gig, from a gig type thing. You told me a story about working at a dive bar in Alabama during dart night. Could you please retell that story? Because that's worth the listen to right now.
You want me to cry into the pillow again?
That sounds fine. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, I had my master's degree in my pocket, and I was exploring being a professional comedian in the very early days. Jasper, Alabama. I mean, I'm from Atlanta. So if you think about, if you draw a drivable circle of 6 hours in all the directions from Atlanta, there's a lot of goober land out there.
Right. Absolutely.
And a lot of my early gigs were in Ramada Inns and dive bars and places that should never have comedy. But that's where you go when you're new. So Jasper, Alabama, I get to there's a dart tournament on the night. They double booked comedy and the dart tournament on the same night. So they moved the comedians from where the stage normally is to the other end of the room. And they put us on the stage of the main stage overlooking the dance floor, but there were no tables and chairs on the dance floor. So we were literally set up to an open wooden floor to no one.
Right.
And there were some people a little bit on the sides of the dance floor who were kind of paying attention to the stand-up show. But invariably something would happen in the dart tournament during one of my setups. Hey, did you ever notice woo? And the 7 people who were kind of watching would turn to see what was happening at the other end of the room. It was a nightmare. And I literally, I think it's the only night I fully cried into a pillow. I had already said no to some other professional opportunities, and I was really committing to being a comic. And the headliner was this old, bitter dude. It was even because I was just a kid, you know. I mean, I cared about it emotionally, but I didn't really need the money yet. You know what I mean?
Right. I get
But the headliner, who was Christmas Future for me, was having a miserable life. And I was like, oh, this is just a disaster in all directions.
Well, thank goodness it got better and you didn't give up. That's a good story. I love those stories. I really and truly do.
Those things toughen you up. I mean, there's and for comics, there's a certain badge that you wear because when you meet each other, you know, without even talking to the person yet, that they've done hundreds of those kinds of things. That
right.
they've driven 12 hours to a club and get there and it's locked and it doesn't exist anymore.
Oh yeah.
We've all had that moment. And you know, the ups and downs of just murdering and killing, and then the very next show, there's just crickets and people can't believe that you do this for a living. The swings in comedy are pretty big.
Oh yeah. I had one individual mention the fact that they got to the gig and thunderstorm came through, lost power. What are you going to do? You can't. You get a dark room. People are still are still drinking, and it's like, okay, your microphone's dead, and you're just like, you need a Mr. Bullhorn is what you need to do. You need to do.
I've done that. I actually did it. We did a gig with a buddy of mine in West Virginia, and there was an outage during the show for a while, and there's no sound, and I was just holding a table candle near me like a microphone so they could kind of see my face.
Oh, jeez. The things we do for our craft, isn't that right?
The show must go on,
absolutely.
baby. What are you going to do? Cancel the show? No, we're not canceling. We're just going to talk louder with no microphone and stand near a candle and make this thing work.
And then pray the check clears, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Let's talk about some links to so people can book you because that's the big thing in this. I'd love for you to get some bookings as a result of this.
Oh, Costaki.com, Costaki.com. There's an email link on there if you want to inquire about bookings. I'm available to come do your private party or corporate show. Or one thing that I've done several of in the last few years is charity events.
Okay,
where you book me for X amount, and then everything you make over that is for the charity. And yeah, Costaki.com has all that stuff. And come follow me on the social media platforms, particularly YouTube.
Always good to talk to you, my friend. Take care. And Leslie says hello. Leslie says hello. My wife.
Oh, cool. Say hello back. Thanks so much, Rick. I appreciate it, man.
All right, buddy. Take care, man.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for listening to this episode of Someone You Should Know. Now, if you're an aspiring musician or an established musician that's looking for a little exposure, I invite you to drop us a line at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. That's someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to tell a friend about the Someone You Should Know podcast. I thank you for tuning in this time, and I invite you to check us out next time on the Someone You Should Know podcast, because you never know who's going to show up. Until next time, remember, God loves you, and so do I.